Good morning or good afternoon, whatever you are. Welcome to CESMII Wave 3 webinar. So this is Miguel Corsi. I'm the Technical Director for Technical Programs at the Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. It's our second one, so if you joined the previous one, you are always welcome to attend this one. But we are repeating repeating what we said on the previous one. There might be a few things probably that will be new, but most of it will be the same. So welcome. We're very excited to walk you through Wave 3 RFP. Hopefully you will learn a few things in here that will help you in the preparation of the responses to the RFP. So I have with me Jonathan White, and I have Haresh Malkani, our CTO. So I will let him do a quick introduction. So go ahead, Haresh.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. Again, good afternoon and good morning to all of you. What we are doing today is providing you with some information that's relevant to the recent 2 waves of RFPs that we issued last week. This one is around what we're calling Wave 3, and it's focused on the development of capabilities required for our SM innovation platform. The second of the 2 waves, Wave 4, is focused on innovation projects, and we have another webinar later today to talk about it. And we did the same thing last week when we had the webinars then. There will be some details that Jonathan Wise, our VP of Technology and Chief Architect of the platform, will speak to later in the slide deck. I want to welcome all of you, and we are hoping to provide you with some useful information to help you prepare your proposals for this wave. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Haresh. Jonathan?
Hi, all. I'm Jonathan Wise. I'm the aforementioned architect for the platform. This is the wave I think I'm most excited about. It's an opportunity for you to really engage on developing and shaping this platform that we're trying to build for everyone. So I'm excited to go into the details with you and answer any questions you have. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, so we have a couple of recommendations before we continue. Oops, something happened here. Hold on. Uh-oh. Yes, so a couple of recommendations for you. First of all, obviously, I'm assuming that all of you have read the RFP. There's a lot of information in there, so I will encourage you to do that and walk through an entire RFP. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit those questions to us. Also, one thing that we'd like to stress here is that if you find any inconsistencies between what we're sharing today in this webinar and the RFP itself, please let us know as soon as possible. Obviously, our intention is to follow the RFP. That's the document that has been approved. And unless there's some serious inconsistencies that will contradict what we're saying today, we will make some changes. Otherwise, we will follow the RFP. So please let us know if you find anything in there that might be a conflict or something. So let me start with a quick agenda here. Obviously, we're going to talk about the mission and the strategy of the Institute. For those of you who are not familiar with the Institute, I'm assuming most of you are, but if you're not, we welcome you, and hopefully you'll find that the Institute is something that we're doing that is good for the entire industry, and you will find some benefits not only on the RFP but also on the other activities that we're doing. We'll talk a little bit about the roadmap and some of the applications that we have. We'll give you an overview of the timeline and the process that we're following for this specific wave. We're also going to get into the actual areas of interest for RFP2 Wave 3 to basically clarify maybe some doubts that you might have. We'll talk about the actual award information, the eligibility. We'll mention briefly about cost sharing. For those of you who are not familiar, we'll give you, kind of a definition on that. We'll look at or give you the access or the links to the proposal templates where you can find all the information related to what we're doing here. And then we'll spend some time getting into the evaluation criteria, so you have a good idea how these proposals will be evaluated and selected. And we're planning to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So I will encourage you to write down your questions while we're going through this presentation, and ask those questions at the end. That way we'll capture them, and then we'll also capture the answers, and we'll post those questions and answers in our website. So with that, let me briefly get into the vision of CESMII. Obviously, as you know, CESMII was created in 2017. It's an institute dedicated to smart manufacturing. And our mission is really to accelerate smart manufacturing in the industry in the US. And with that, we have some specific objectives, some specific goals that you probably have seen in previous RFPs, because the RFPs are helping us achieve our goals and objectives, all the way from energy productivity, increasing environmental sustainability. We're dedicating some projects and one RFP actually to workforce development, smart manufacturing workforce development capacity. And we're looking for some serious improvements when it comes to energy efficiency, 50%, 15%, 50% improvement in energy productivity in 10 years. So for some of you, that might look pretty aggressive, but I think it is achievable with all the different things that we're doing and all the activities that we are developing in the Institute. And our goal is to really democratize, everything that we're doing, and making this more affordable to all the different companies, the small, medium enterprises as well. And we're looking at ways to do that, through all the projects that we're running, the tools that we're developing, and the whole objective again is to really, help the industry accelerate smart manufacturing and come and deploy, the tools and the solutions that we're developing. So I hope this gives you just a kind of a quick overview. I don't want to spend too much time because this has been we have developed this and for a couple of years. We've been sending this message across, different presentations. We also have it in our website, so you can always refer back to that if you need to. As far as the kind of a summary of the objectives, this is something that I always like to share because it kind of gives you the bullet points that you can go through really quick. What are our real objectives? Well, we got leading a national effort to develop, research, test, and widely validate smart technologies, smart manufacturing technologies and practices. So as you can see, everything kind of follows each other, kind of everything is tied together. We have a roadmap, like I said earlier, related to the technology that we're developing through our projects and also internally. Practices, services, training, all of that is being captured. We are supporting research and development, obviously, in open and pre-competitive work. So, we're really strong in bringing teams together and make them, help them work together to achieve specific objectives that we want, and to work together in projects. And this wave 3 is an example of that as well. We are dedicating a lot of efforts into workforce development through projects, as well as, internally looking at some programs and working closely with other institutions as well. So, and one of our big objectives is also to stimulate the growth of the smart manufacturing supply chain. So don't want to spend too much time on this again, but I wanted just to highlight the fact that these are something that you should keep in mind as you're developing your proposals, because in a way, our proposals and all the projects that we're doing have to tie back to our objectives and help us achieve those. In terms of the performance matrix for the Institute, we have specific measures that we're trying to follow. Energy productivity is one of them. Doubling productivity in the next 10 years. Energy efficiency, improvement, 15% improvement. So that's also something that we're keeping in mind throughout the projects, making sure that we achieve that. And then the cost of deployment of smart manufacturing technologies is something that we definitely tackle very hard with our projects to make sure that, as we develop these technologies, that they are implemented in the different industry, different sectors, and small and medium enterprises as well, and help them do that. The adoption cost is another one that we're looking into from the SESMII perspective, and trying to measure that to make sure that we are successful. And also, how we are training our existing workforce, as well as preparing for the future, and preparing our future smart manufacturing engineers or people that are going to be working in that field. Okay, so I'm again, just a very quick overview. So just to give you a flavor and an idea, in case you are not familiar with the Institute, at least you will have some bullet points here that will kind of guide you through the overall objectives and performance of the Institute. With that, we're going to get now right into what we're trying to achieve with this specific wave, RFP wave. And I'm going to ask Haresh if he was so kind to walk us through the different types of projects that we have in our Institute, because this is important that you realize where this specific RFP falls and how to prepare for that. So Haresh, if you don't mind, could you please help us with this slide?
Yeah, happy to, Miguel. So what you see on the slide on the left-hand side is a articulation of a high-level roadmap that we have in the Institute. And what you see there are 4 blocks. So we actually call them pillars. But if you look at the blocks on the left-hand side, they are the non-technical blocks, meaning that they deal with the business practices and workforce development pieces of our strategy. Whereas the right-hand side deals with the technology side. And if you look at the top right, that is something called enabling technology. So when you talk about, sensing, control, analytics, modeling, these are pieces that make up the smart manufacturing ecosystem. And then below that is the SM platform infrastructure. And that's where you're talking about what is the infrastructure required to make to create a solution, to make sure that the data and information is moving seamlessly through your components, and you're making things repeatable and secure and those kinds of things, right? So what we have outlined here are the types of projects that we fund. If you look at the top right-hand side, we've our first RFP and our first wave of the second RFP were focused on the enabling R&D projects. I'll skip for a second the innovation project, but the one highlighted in green is what we're going to be talking about in this webinar. And that's everything to build the capability of our innovation platform. So, what are the core components that need to be there? What are the capabilities and tools we need to have in order for manufacturers and our members to actually solve their problems? The innovation projects right in the middle is sort of a combination of the two, where we are actually asking folks to come up with use cases that address specific manufacturing problems, but at the same time, develop information models and applications that are required to solve that problem. And these information models and applications eventually become part of our platform marketplace. Down at the bottom are application projects, and this is essentially geared towards demonstrating what we already have. So when you talk about the capabilities of the platform, we actually ask members to come up with problems and use cases that can be solved with the existing capabilities. And also at the same time, give us some feedback on what are the gaps in our capabilities. So that's the application projects. And then on the bottom left are projects that have to do with workforce development and training. So we have our second RFP, Wave 2, was all focused on education and workforce development. So those are the classifications of projects that we have. Hopefully that gives you some idea. Back to you, Miguel.
Thank you, Haresh. So let's get into the actual process that we're going to follow through the RFP. And again, if you're not familiar, this will give you an idea of what we're following in terms of the different steps through the RFP. If you have participated in a previous RFP, you're probably familiar with this process. But for the benefit of those who have this would be their first time participating in an RFP, let me walk you through the different stages that we have in the RFP. So first, we start with the areas of interest. This is where we spend a lot of time, Haresh, particularly, leading this effort to make sure that working with the affinity groups and some other teams that we have to, find out, what are the areas of interest, what do we need to cover in the RFPs? And there's a lot of discussions and work that goes into that before we release the RFP. So once the areas of interest are developed, highlighted and approved by the DOE, and we all have to come to a consensus on that, we issue the RFP, and that's what we've done, in the last week or so. And once the RFP is issued, then we get into the different stages of, the proposal preparation, which is what you're doing right now, conducting these type of trainings to make sure that you have all the information necessary to put together a good proposal. And then once the proposals are submitted, we go into what we call the evaluation and selection. And for the evaluation and selection, we have an external group of evaluators that will help us with that. Typically, we assign about 2 or 3 evaluators for each proposal, and they look at specific things. And I'll get into the criteria in a few minutes. But their task is to make sure that they look at these proposals individually. We have a rating system. And then once all that information is collected and all the evaluators complete their evaluations, internally at CESMII, we collect that, we assemble everything, we consolidate the results. And then we internally, go through another evaluation, which is more aligned with the portfolio management to make sure that we don't have any redundant projects or anything, that will not be bringing us the value that we want for CESMII. So after we go through that internal selection and taking into consideration the evaluations, comments and ratings, we come to a consensus, and then we select the projects that we need for the RFP. And once that selection is done, we work with the DOE to make sure that they're in agreement with our selection. And then we proceed to the next stage, which is negotiations. So the selected proposals or lead organizations will get notified. Once they get notified, we get into the negotiation phase, which is maybe looking at the specific issues that we found through the evaluation, maybe clarification on the scope. It could be cost related as well. So there's a lot of other things that we need to check during that phase to make sure that we end up with the right project at the end. And once we finish the negotiations and we're all in agreement and all the questions have been answered, everything has been addressed and no issues have been found after that, then we move into the contracting phase, which is specifically the organizations that have been selected to develop the documents that will be required for the contracting phase, which is developing the statements of works, the work breakdown structures, making sure you have the complete budget and all the supporting information is as well submitted. And then once those documents are being received and checked to make sure they complied with the requirements from the DOE, then the DOE will go ahead and do what we call the technical and financial and contracting review, which is, they look at each document to make sure that they have all the information that they need, that there are letters involved in the cost share letters and a lot of other things that they might be required. Not every project will require exactly the same thing. And then once the documents are checked and validated and everything is ready, then it's just a matter of the contracting. So the DOE will officially notify CESMII that those projects have been accepted and then the cost has been accepted. Then UCLA will go ahead and start working on what we call the sub-recipient agreements with the individual lead organizations to make sure that the project is ready to start. So once the sub-recipient agreements are in place and approved by both parties, then obviously, the project can start. And there'll be a kickoff meeting to start the projects. And then we get into the second, execution of the project, which is just, working and delivering what we promised. So I hope this gives you a general idea of, the process. Obviously, this is a very simplified version. We got a lot of other activities in there, but primarily these are the highlights. And as you can see, we try to follow this stage gate type of process. So far, it's been very effective. In terms of the duration of these specific activities, it's really hard to give specific numbers of weeks and how much it's going to take, because it really depends on the type of projects that we're following the RFP. Typically, we put in here 6 to 8 weeks for each of these areas, but it could be less, it could be more, it depending on what we're doing and the type of projects and what issues we find. So if we don't have too many issues during the evaluation, there's really not a lot of issues during the negotiations, and we receive solid documents after that, then this process can be accelerated as well. So if you have questions, please keep those questions ready, because we're going to get to those in a minute. In terms of the actual timeline for this wave 3, you've seen this on the RFP. I just wanted to highlight a few points here. Obviously, you probably have this deadline for the full proposals in your mind. June 19 is what we're expecting to see all the proposals. Right after that, we're going to get into the selection, okay, and the evaluation. And hopefully by August 7, you will be notified whether your proposal was selected or not. And with that, there will be some communications telling you some of the highlights that we found in your proposal. And for those organizations that will be selected, we're going to get into the negotiation meetings by August 21st. It should be completed that. So we're going to have about 3 weeks to do negotiations. And then we're going to have, another couple of weeks to do the final documents preparations. And then the DOE will review the documents. And hopefully by September 18, everything will be reviewed and complete. And that's the time where we're going to be executing the sub-recipient agreements and hopefully planning for the October 26th expected start date, the kickoff meetings. So again, these are the highlights on the timeline. Things could change. If they change, we'll let you know. But we are trying to follow this schedule as close as possible. So starting with the submission deadlines, which is the next big milestone in this process, June 19, we'll keep working on the other activities after that. So with that, I would like to, this point, invite Jonathan to help us and walk us through the areas of interest and shed a little bit more light on what we're trying to accomplish in this RFP through those areas of interest. So Jonathan, if you don't mind, could you please take it from here and walk us through the areas of interest, please?
Sure. You want to give me the next slide?
Sure.
So our platform strategy, our technology strategy in general really has these 3 pillars. The platform core is the part that allows different components to interoperate. It's the interface of record, not necessarily the system of record, but the interface of record for data as it flows from the edge and out to the applications that we hope create new value against that data. A thread that runs through all 3 of those layers is the smart manufacturing profile, articulated here as common information models. This is technology that we're building in partnership with existing standards bodies to encapsulate a structure of data and preserve its context so that it can present an interface to the applications. And that needs to exist from the edge through the core and out to the applications. And then the final pillar is the marketplace. Marketplace will start as a place for all of you to tell others about your solutions and value. It's primarily a marketing gateway for the near future, but we want it to evolve along with partners to become a system where the acquisition of technology can be automatically facilitated. So hopefully what you'll see in these areas of interest are things that move each of those pillars forward a little bit. On the next slide, we'll start with the profiles. there's sort of two parts to these bullets, and feel free to read the bullets, but to break them down a little bit or maybe rephrase them. At the bottom end, we are looking for projects that take our existing edge connector and package and bundle it in ways that become easier to deploy. So we want to support more environments, more operating systems. We want to package the edge onto hardware so people can acquire an appliance that has everything they need already in the box. So that's actually plugging something in to get data flowing. The top two bullets correspond to parts 1 and parts 2 of the profile specification that we're working on. In part 1, we are expressing data models. These are static interfaces, static class definitions for structures of pre-knowable data that can be found in common manufacturing environments. One of the things that we would like to do is reflect existing standards or proprietary technology into those to accelerate the creation of new profiles. So part 1 is can we define a class of data, and so projects we're interested in here would allow us to take existing definitions and turn them automatically into profiles. And we think that doesn't just help our goals, it helps the industry in general, because those profiles are OPC UA type definitions. They are a standard that can be used, will be used throughout our stack, but can benefit everyone as well. Part 2 of the profile spec, so the first bullet there, is actually binding the class definition to various protocols. So unlike the second bullet, which is taking existing structures and mapping them onto a UA type definition or a profile, this one is about taking those type definitions and coming up with a way to bind them to real-world protocols. So some of them are listed that we're interested in. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just kind of top of mind for us right now based on what we're hearing from the membership. But this area of interest is all about binding part 2 of a profile to part 1 of a profile, taking a transport layer protocol and connecting it to a class definition to automate data acquisition. On the next slide, we have some areas of interest around beginning to seed the marketplace. There's a bunch of things that we want to do here, but some of the kind of first steps will be a means for ingesting profiles and applications, a means for identifying what applications use which profiles, so that if a user has a profile implemented, we can tell them what apps would work. And conversely, if a user wants an app, and I'm speaking of apps generally, apps are any creation of value from raw data. So it could be a predictive algorithm, could be a mobile app, it could be an augmented reality tool. If a user wants to acquire one of these apps that ends up in the marketplace, the requirement to fulfill that app's needs will be the profile. The profile is a contract for an application developer. So we need a mechanism for apps to identify the profiles that they use so that we can take those two things and we can begin automatically deploying the infrastructure that a user would need in order to get the value they've acquired at the marketplace. In this wave, we are not going to get to the end of that journey, but we're hopefully going to take some steps with you in beginning that journey. There's some other groundwork that we need to do as well. And so we're inviting projects on the next slide around setting up the marketplace for various organizations to use. So this includes things like integrating the platform into directory services so that users of the platform don't need to create a new username and password, not just for the CESMII platform, but for every app that they want to get through the CESMII marketplace. we're looking for projects to help us with automatic scale up or scale down. The core platform itself is built to scale, but we're going to have these external bits, external to the core, like the apps, the different databases that people might want to send data to, and we'd like to be able to scale them all at once, or at least to allow an administrator the ability to scale the resources together instead of having to follow dozens of different guides for scale up or scale down. This also allows people to manage costs. The profile provides the main interface for data. The profile is going to rev. There's going to be new versions as it hopefully rapidly evolves, but there'll be other APIs as well that are going to need to evolve that are outside of just the access to data, things like logging in and getting access to a token. These things are going to rev, so we need a strategy for maintaining backwards compatibility as the platform evolves. So we're inviting those who have expertise on these kinds of things to participate. And then application permissions. So we talked about user permissions in directories, but we also want to come up with a model not unlike apps on your phone. When you install an app, it identifies the permissions it wants to use. And you, as the administrator of your phone, can decide if you want that app to have access to your address book or your location. We obviously need another level of granularity for manufacturing applications, but we want that same level of transparency. Before you acquire an app, you can understand what permissions it wants, what kinds of data it's going to work against, and you need a way to grant those permissions or revoke them if you decide later that the application is not a good actor and it's not something you want accessing your data. So all of these things are ideas that we have at this point that we've been discussing within the CESMII tech team, and we want to kind of open the doors to participation from members and potential members who have expertise in these areas that can help us begin to shape the marketplace. I think that's my last slide, Miguel.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the actual work right now. So as you all know, what we're looking for is around maybe 8 projects. We have about $1 million in federal fundings plus $1 million what we're asking for cost share for these projects for a period of performance between 6 and 12 months. Now, the numbers, the 8 numbers that we have there, the number of work anticipated, that's not a hard number because we obviously, it all depends on the type of projects that we get. So, but that gives you kind of an idea of what we're shooting for right now. But it could be less, it could be a little bit more. It really depends on the types of projects and the different proposals that we get. At least it will guide, this will give you some ideas and guide you through the preparation of your proposals with those numbers in mind. In terms of the period of performance, just a couple of reminders here. As you saw on the process overview, this is a stage-gated process. So we will follow that and we will continue moving forward as we accomplish some of these milestones. There will be a one go, no go decision point for every budget period. For example, if your proposal is a 12-month long project, then obviously you will be transitioning between budget period 3 into budget period 4 of the Institute, which is what we follow. And at that point, we'll have one big milestone, a go, no go decision point. So I wanted to also give you a quick highlight here on where we are in terms of the projects and the budget periods. We're anticipating that probably January 2021 is when we're going to need a go, no go decision point in these projects. That's when our budget period 3 will end. And then we're going to move into budget period 4. So the second phase, obviously, what's going to start in budget period 4 will be February 2021. And we will have some discussions around the UCLA and negotiating the sub-recipient agreements. This is an area that sometimes people tend to overlook at this particular stage of the process. There will be some discussions in terms of the actual agreements between UCLA and the lead organization. So The sooner we start that process, the better. And you know, this could be very time consuming in some cases, depending on the organizations. So let's talk about the applicants and who's eligible. Obviously, anybody can apply for this RFP. The only recommendation that we have and the requirement is that once we select the proposals, if you are one of those, you have to be in good standing in terms of membership with SESMII. And by that, we mean, you know, all your paperwork, everything has to be in place, approved, you know, and you're current and everything. One problem that we have seen in the past is if you are planning to use, or if you are a foreign entity, or you will have a foreign entity as part of your team, then that process can extend a little bit longer. So we need to start that process as soon as possible. Because dealing with foreign entities sometimes requires, excuse me, requires a special part from the DOE to get it approved. So just word of caution on that. You know, make sure that if you're planning on using or bringing a member that is a foreign entity, let's talk about it at the earliest convenience. Okay, let me continue with some of the points for the non-responsive proposals. Obviously, we'll follow the RFP. There are some strict recommendations in there in terms of the number of pages, the type of things that we like to see. We will check that before we even get into the actual evaluation to make sure that the proposals conform to that. You know, obviously the technology and everything that you will be proposing, you know, it's something that doesn't violate any laws or anything like that. And proposals focus on the deployment of commercialized technology also, you know, it's a risk. So just wanted to highlight these 3 bullet points for you. Keep those in mind. If you are in doubt in any of them, you know, at any particular point during the proposal evaluation, please send your questions. You know, we are going to be entertaining questions right until the end of the proposal deadline. So questions will be received and the questions will be answered and posted in our website. In terms of cost share, we wanted to give you just a quick idea on this. I know we might have some companies that might not be familiar with this term. If you have participated with any government contracts in the past, you're probably well familiar. But we just wanted to make sure that you understand this. First of all, we are asking a 50% cost share, meaning that there will be 50% from federal and the 50% will be absorbed by the project team. One clarification here is that the 50% is the total for the project. So if you have multiple members in your team and not all of them can contribute 50%, then it's okay as long as the total for the entire project is 50%. For example, as the lead organization might put 60%. One of the team members might say, I can only give you 40%, and so on and so forth. So, but what we're looking here is the total. So keep that in mind as well. This is a very common question that I usually get. You know, not every member has to provide the same, but the project total 50%. Okay. And obviously we're gonna get and review that during the negotiations just to make sure that all of that is included. Okay, now what you might be asking if you're new to this, you know, what is cost share? Because this is a typical question, especially if you haven't worked with the government before and you haven't participated in this type of RFPs. You know, for example, in my case, I came from the industry. I spent a lot of time with the industry, never worked with the government in that capacity. But you know, when I started looking into cost share, I had to learn, you know, what do they mean? You know, what is considered a cost share, what is not. There's a lot of information on that, obviously. I mean, the government has some specific documents that will guide you through that, and we have listed a few here. But in essence, you know, some examples of cost share would be personal cost, raw materials, you know, hardware or software could be cost share, the utilization of your facilities and the administrative cost, rental, you know, all that. Supercomputer usage is another cost share that could be provided as well. So there's this is a very short list, but we do have more in those documents that go through some very specific what could be cost share and what cannot be cost share. So Now, since we're going to be running out of time soon, I'd like to spend some time on the selection criteria. This one, just to let you know, we have 3 different areas that we use in terms of evaluating the proposals. The first one is what we call the general criteria, which is specifically just to make sure that we look at the business impact, at the technical significance in the project execution phase. So that one is done internally. We do it just to make sure that everything aligns with our technical roadmap. The next one is the technical evaluation criteria. This is the one that is conducted outside with external evaluators, and they typically look into the technical merits. They look into the approach, the technical approach that you are proposing in your document, your proposal. And they also look at your technical management capabilities, the team that you are proposing for the project. So they will do that. This is the external evaluators, work that they have to do. They will look into every one of these categories and assign a number. And the way you see there, the technical merit is 40%. The approach, we give it a 35%, and the technical and management capabilities will have a weight of 25%. So this is, we get this from the external evaluators. And then the last one, which is the portfolio selection criteria, this is done internally as well, which is, we look at the different projects that have been evaluated, we look at the ratings, and then we look at the specific goals of the institutes to see how those proposals that have been surfacing to the top are meeting those specific goals of the institute. So we'll do what we call the portfolio selection and management at this point to make sure that the projects that we are selecting are the right ones for our institute. So again, you have this information in the RFP, not probably as much as the details here, but the presentation will be available to you, so you can refer back to this anytime you want to. And again, if there are any questions or comments, we are welcome those as well. In terms of where these documents will be posted, we have the links here. They're all going to be in our website. We are putting all the information in there. We're making it easier for you to find these documents. So they will find, you will find the templates, you will have copies of this presentation, you will find, the questions and answers, you will find the actual RFP as well, and anything else related to this RFP will be posted there. So with that, before we get into the questions and answers, I would like to spend a couple of minutes asking Haresh if he can give us an idea here, because this is important, of the ecosystem that we have at CESMII. So you will see how your organization will fit into CESMII as a group, as an institute. So Haresh, if you don't mind.
Sure, Miguel. Well, one of the things that CESMII is really proud of is the ability to have an ecosystem that includes all different types of entities. And if you look at that first row, you can see, so you got a manufacturer, you got an app vendor, you got systems integrators, both OT and IT. You got people who actually build devices and machines, and you have the academia and the labs. And for each of these entities, there's a different value proposition for joining CESMII. And I won't read through all of them, but you'll have access to the slide. But you can see the different ways in which these entities can engage with CESMII and vice versa, and what value can be derived out of it. And as you're going through this, if you have any specific conversations that you want to have with us, if you're new to CESMII, we are more than happy to have the right people engage with you. So just keep that in mind.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Haresh. So with that, let's get into the questions and answers, which I think would be something really important at this point. So let me get back in here. Let's see. Let's give me a second.
Why don't I take the first one while you're looking?
Go ahead. Yes.
I see one. What is the SMIP connector? Great question. So SMIP is our acronym for the Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform, sometimes just the platform. The connector is the edge component. So we need very little in the way of local infrastructure changes. The connector is a small bit of software that currently runs on a Windows PC, and it has to be in the DMZ or has to have a route to the internet. The connector talks a variety of protocols down into the manufacturing system and transmits over an encrypted connection to the platform. So it's used to pump data out of an operational system and into an information system.
Okay. Aresh, you want to take the next one related to IP?
Yeah, happy to. So the way CESMII works is that any IP that is developed through the projects that are being funded. So if you're part of a team that is awarded a project, any IP generated by that team during that project belongs to that team. Any IP that is brought to the table beforehand obviously belongs to that entity, that's there in that team. Now, once that IP is generated through the projects, we want that IP or that solution, the information model, the application, be available to CESMII members for non-production purposes. So if somebody wants to take the solution you've developed and give it a try for their own use case, and if it's applicable, then we would like them to be able to use that free of cost. But once that is done, and if they like the idea, and then they say, well, we want to now put it on 15 of our plants, then it's a separate conversation between the person who wants to use that IP and deploy it and the team that owns the IP. And then, we can kind of help with some of that conversation, but that's the conversation between those who own the IP and those who want to use it.
Very good. I think the next one is for you, Jonathan.
Yeah, so the question is, does secure data access management and exchange include an API layer to access the data in the platform from an external system? What I'd encourage you to do is read the full RFP. The bulleted areas here are where we're trying to kind of guide the responses. We have an API layer now. That API layer has a security mechanism on it. We are not looking to compete different API layers, but we do need to add some capabilities to it. So please don't propose a brand new API. We've spent the past 6-7 months working with the membership and the standards body on a GraphQL-based API that sits on top of OPC UA and the platform, and we think is really powerful. We put out a video demonstrating how people can integrate with that a couple weeks ago, but do look at the areas of interest to find the gaps that we're looking to fill, and to the extent that you have capabilities there, we would love to hear from you with a proposal.
Yeah, just quickly, Jonathan, in the full RFP, you will actually see a link to the video that Jonathan is referring to, if you don't find it elsewhere.
Great. Any other questions? I don't see other questions. All right.
Yeah, I think those are the ones that I saw as well.
Okay. So we are capturing these questions plus the ones that we received on the previous webinar. So all of them will be consolidated and available to you, to the whole team. So, all right. So no more open questions. So any last words, Haresh, before we close the webinar?
No, thank you for joining us today. And like I said before, we are excited to see some proposals come our way, and looking forward to a great partnership with all of you. I think there's one last question around the presentation. I think we are recording the webinar, and the presentations would be made available to everybody, I believe. So.
Correct. And so if you participated in the previous webinar, we also recorded that one. We obviously just gonna make one available. It's just big files, but we'll pick the one that covers most of the stuff. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Jonathan, for helping us as well. And we're looking forward to receive your proposals. It's a very exciting time. So good luck, best wishes to all of you. And we're looking forward to continue the process. So thank you very much.
Stay safe.